What's up, Holly Quinn?
Hey, I just want you guys to know that from here down, I am still in my pajamas.
You're still in your pajamas?
I've been working all morning, but haven't quite gotten around to. I'm not seeing clients today, so I'm staging a house and meeting somebody for a sewer scope and making
Oh,
making my calls. Put
I
$2
will
million
warn
dollars under contract this week.
I will warn you, you are live on Facebook, so now the whole world knows that you're in your PJs.
I mean, I'm dressed to the nines.
You look great. How have you been?
Good, been good. I'm glad that real estate is starting to, kind of tick back up and now seeing what's happening with all this NAR stuff, and we'll be pros after today.
We will be
Well, have
pros
you,
after.
Holly, have you guys, has your guys' MLS pulled it?
Yeah.
Yep, we have too. So we've been, we're what, half a week into it.
So what
I
do you
know,
mean by pulling it? Can you explain that?
so, basically the deadline was August 17th. But across the country, different MLSs made the decision to remove the co-broke compensation when they felt like they should. I know a lot of places on the East Coast, they're already on their second week of it not being published. Ours earlier than dropped off earlier than what they anticipated, which kind of put some things in a frenzy. And what you're seeing is these first few days, really the confusion is if I had the sale put together before it was removed from before it was moved from being published, do I have to go back and do anything? Am I protected? Am I not protected? What's happening there? And then some states, and Wisconsin being one of them, some states added it to their, added the a commission to be paid directly from the seller right to the offer to purchase, which then if you look at the language to the letter, if you had a listing agreement signed, an old listing agreement signed, and you accepted a new offer to purchase with the new language in there, then what happens is your seller really is obligated to pay two commissions now to the buyer broker. So then you have to go back and do an amendment. So I mean, really what we're seeing these first, you could say these first few days or these first hours that this has got rolled out is it's scrambling, it's confusion and whatnot. But I mean, it's one of these things where they're just going to have to learn it, bite the bullet, and know when before you accept an offer, you're going to have to look at where it falls. So it's interesting.
That's right. That's right. Well, you gave a little taste of Jay's intelligence and his thoroughness and how much he's researched this topic. And my name's Chad Lubin. I appreciate everyone tuning in. I know there's some on Zoom. I know there's a lot of you on Facebook Live. And this is my partner, my friend, who I think is just not an amazing businessman, one of the best real estate agents in the entire country. And I wanted Jay to come on because he has been working in a buyer agency agreement state. So a lot of these, the real process of having to sign this is not new for him. However, he will acknowledge that, with the media pumping this out there, with the just lawsuit being publicized as it is, this is a change for him too. So we wanted to get on, pour into you today, talk about his business and how he has scripted, how he has developed, and just some best practices that he's already had in place from having a buyer agency agreement state, but also what he's changed in his process because of the just public display of this change, right? And we want to talk about that a little bit. And then we wanted to talk about the lender realtor relationship and communication, what we've changed, why we've had to change it. I will go back and forth with Jay on that. And anyone chime in. We're here to help you today, especially those that took the time to register on Zoom and come on Zoom. So please ask questions away, ask best practices. Jay is about to have his best year ever, and already being one of the top realtors in the country, to be in August and having his best year ever just says how dialed in he is, how good he is at prospecting. I just find him, of many agents that I know across the country that I've met of coaching, being the most organized, being a master scripter, but willing to always help out those around. So Jay is in Hudson, Wisconsin, and I just wanted him on today so he could pour into you guys with what he sees and what he's changed. So let's start, Jay, first. Like, you guys have already had buyer agency agreement. I'm correct in saying that, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I operate in 2 states, and we've had buyer agency agreement in slightly different in both states, but we've had it the entire time I've been selling real estate. So we're talking 3 decades. So this whole the whole NAR settlement and all the news and every webinar and everything out there, to me, is really more about publishing the compensation, the removal of putting it out there and the published on MLS. That's really what it's about in our states. Now, I do know, because I talk to a lot of people in multiple states, a lot of other states don't necessarily have buyer agency, but we have had buyer agency now for, like I said, the entire time I've been practicing. Now, with that being said, I'm not saying everybody does it right. Most people will go and show properties without having it signed, myself included. I've done that before. We've also been a Pop-Tart, where we popped out the toaster and went right to the house just because we had a live buyer on the phone, and we showed the house, and they were interested in it, and we wrote an offer. And of course, when we sent the offer over to get electronic signatures, what's the first thing we sent? The buyer agency. So I mean, we've done it wrong, but we've also done it right. Pretty hardcore for like the last 3 or 4 years. We've done it right, and I'll tell you, the reason why we changed is not because we foresaw this coming. The reason why we changed is because I got sick of working on a Wednesday night and someone didn't buy a house, and I should have probably been home with my daughter. So we kind of took a strong stance that if you want to be a buyer and work with either myself or my team, you have to come into the office and you have to go through our buyer interview process, which is basically a buyer consultation. It's no different than a listing appointment, with the exception we go through all the services of a buyer. And we got to the point about 3 or 4 years ago that we just said, you know what? We're not going to show you a home unless you take the time to do that first. And that changed our business, because it really weeded out people that were just wasting our time.
So
that's step number one in this whole process is start doing a buyer consultation in your office. It's just more professional.
So if we're in the office, how do you feel about it over Zoom? Some of my Chicago agents are on, and we'll work with people that are hour and a half out in traffic, one way. So how do you feel about that being over Zoom?
I look at it this way: you got to use the tools that are available to you. First and foremost, in the office, face to face is the most impactful.
I agree.
Okay, if that's not convenient or it doesn't work for the client, yes, Zoom probably the next best thing, especially when you can share your screen, you can pull up your presentation, you can talk about the market, they can get to know you a little bit. That's the next best thing. You don't have to leave, you can get it done, right? And then I think that the thing, even after Zoom, if you can't do in your office face to face and you can't get Zoom done, you need to have a conversation and then follow it up with some states have showing agreements now. And in some states you have buyer agency or buyer broker agreements, and they don't even have the showing agreements. But I think the format is face to face is preference, Zoom is second, phone call third.
Yeah,
But what I
know.
would not do is, I don't know if I would meet somebody at the house and sit there in front of your car and go, hey, I need this signed before we go in. Because the minute they say, I ain't signing that, well, you just drove all the way across town to sit in front of someone else's listing.
Yeah, I
Unless
really
you're a
like that.
photographer, you don't get paid to do that.
I really like that you said that, Jay. I know about around the same time that you required the buyer to come in, go through your buyer intake process. We made a rule on our team, and it was you don't get my time unless we have your application and your documentation, and you're willing to meet on Zoom or in our office. No more selling over text. No more selling over email, no more selling over the phone. The phone was a place for me to get that meeting and maybe to answer some initial questions and build rapport and add some value. But we really took it to you don't get my time unless we can meet like this. So I think
And I'll
that's
tell you,
super.
the more you practice like that, the better qualified client you're going to get, and the better
Absolutely.
your business you're going to have, the less stress and anxiety you're going to have, and the less runaround that you're going. They're not going to run you around. I mean, if you think about every other professional out there, like they make you book an appointment, and you're working on their time, their calendar. Like you can't call your doctor up and say, "Hey, I want to see this house right now." Like I can't call my doctor on Saturday morning at 7 o'clock and say, "Man, I got this thing on my toe. I need you to come look at it." It's like every other profession treats themselves like a professional, except for real estate agents. We're like, I'm open 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Really? I don't want to be available 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
So what do you think are some keys to your buyer intake process? Let's help them build out that
Yeah.
process a little bit. And with this change coming up, maybe give 3 to 5 milestones in your buyer intake process that you think would add value to theirs.
So the first step about the process, and it's a mindset. This is really key. It's you're interviewing them. And the reason why that's important to start with that mentality, because you don't want to work with every buyer. And so you gotta take the approach that you're interviewing them. Your time is valuable, your experience is valuable, your knowledge is valuable, and you want to go through the things that you need to see in a buyer. Like right now, if you're a buyer in my marketplace, and one of the questions I will ask you is, hey, if the house is 100,000, what would you make an offer on it? They say, well, I like to get a deal. I'm going to make a $90,000 offer on it. I'm going to say, well, 10% from list to sale price is not where our market's at. Our market's at 99.3%. So on average, our homes are selling for just a hair below what they're asking. If you want to go make offers 10% below, I'm probably not the right agent for you.
Great qualifying question up front.
Yeah, so it's things like that. The first step is making sure this is a buyer you want to work with.
Yeah. Yeah. On the lender side, that's like, hey, what's the most important thing I do to earn your business? That's my qualifying question. And when they say rate, I got to overcome that objection right then or send them out my door because they're just going to take up all my time, all my resources, my reputation, and then shot me to death at the end of the process. And then we gave all of our time, all of our resources, our reputation that we've been working 25 years to build, and we get nothing out of it. So I love
Yeah,
that.
so and one of the big questions I'll ask them is, hey, is the objective to get a house or not? Because I need to know this, because if your objective is to get a house, to get your family in a house, I may have to give you the advice to go above and beyond the sales price. I may have to ask you to give them more to get it. Now, if your objective is to get a deal, we have conflicting measures, because getting a deal and getting you into a house are going to work against each other in this market.
I love
So
that.
we do go through those, like what are must-haves, what are like to have, but we go through this whole consultation. We call it the buyer interview process. I'll give you a copy of it, Chad. It's like 7 pages long, legal format, and it basically has question for question what I'll ask. I don't even deviate from it myself. I created it for agents on my team to walk through it. But now when I do it, I don't even deviate. Sometimes I look like an idiot. I'm holding there and I'm going, okay, are you prepared to make an offer above list price? And I look up. You know, it's like, that's what I'm doing sometimes. It's
Yeah.
just step by step. And then, so
Yeah.
that's critical. The next critical part is basically talking, we use the word stack a lot, right? In this marketplace, you need to create a buyer value stack. So you need to create what type of value you're giving that buyer. And here's the thing, and this is what I'm most excited about. One thing that got under my skin in real estate, and it will always still be there, it's not like it's gone, is other agents. Like, I've had agents show up to a listing, they've only qualified to open up the lockbox. They take their buyer through the listing. Their buyers proceeded to call me with all the questions. Their buyers proceeded to ask me to do all the due diligence. And then they just wrote the offer, and I got to slide a $35,000 check over to them. And all they did is open a lockbox. Okay, my 6-year-old daughter at the time could open the lockbox. And so it's just like, we're giving a lot of money away because someone answered a Zillow call or someone answered a realtor call, right? .com call, right? It's like, that's a lot of money. And then the other thing that's really bothers me a ton is my sellers are paying for this commission, and they're paying for an agent that either is really good and working against them or really incompetent and we're overpaying them. I don't like either one. So
Right.
the fact that you get the opportunity now to negotiate your value on the buyer side is genius. Some of you might say, you know what? I'm worth 4% when I'm representing the buyer. Some of you might say, oh, I'm one of those guys that just open up the lockbox. I'll be happy for $1,500. And that's okay. There's going to be people that will do this on a flat fee basis, that will open up lock boxes for $10 a property, $100 an hour, $1,500. That's okay. It won't be me. But if they come to my listing and they're taking a fee of $1,500 just to open up the lockbox, that's good for my seller.
Right.
So
And
if you're
more
going to
money to
hire
you
me
on
to represent you as a buyer, it's costing you at least 3 points.
more money
Let
to
me
you
show
on
you
the
why.
list side, right?
What's that?
More money to you on the list side, right?
I don't necessarily think there's going to be more money to me on the list side. I actually think that's probably one place where you're going to have some compression on commission,
You do.
because I do think you're going to have these conversations with your sellers where you're saying, hey, I'm 6.5 and we're going to pay out 2.7. And the seller's going to say, well, what if they don't have an agent? I mean, that happens now. And so when it happens now, I just basically tell them I'm still 6.5 because I got to do all that work for the buyer. So what's going to happen is you're going to be negotiating your list side, and you're going to be negotiating that buy side in the event that there's not a buyer's agent, and you're probably going to be negotiating that at the time of listing.
So
So again,
I want to ask a couple questions on that, okay? Um, and I want to come back to a situation we had, right? But so you think that is probable? I'm already seeing more open houses. I'm seeing agents doing more open houses because now it's like, hey, you can have that situation and you can have a buyer walk into your product. And if you think about buying a car, you don't go in and have buyer representation when you purchase a car. You're going for the product, right? You don't have someone looking out for your best interest when you're buying a car, right? You need to do your own research. So I see some of it, and that's how Europe, parts of Europe is it's gone that way, right? So how do you see that happening, and what are you changing on your listings to capture some of that added revenue that could come in from just buyers walking into your product? And what are some best practices there?
all right, so on the listing side, yes, open houses again are going to become profitable for a listing agent. I was one of the agents up until every listing appointment up until this week. I basically told them, hey, if you want open houses, I'll do an open house, but the open house is going to be probably with a different agent. And I want you to know the open houses don't necessarily sell your house. It is unqualified people, tire kickers, neighbors that will tend to come through. And you see a lot of that. But I do now see open houses are going to be extremely valuable for a listing agent, because there's going to be a handful of buyers that will just say, I'm going to go directly to the listing agent. And I that's going to happen. There's going to be buyers where even the best agent's not going to be able to explain their value. I mean, you have them now. You have
Yeah.
buyers now that just don't see the value in an agent. That's not going away, right?
Let me scare him real quick, Jay, and tell me
Yeah.
how you would have handled this situation. Okay. So, many states, this has already happened. I'm in Chicago market. I'm in the North Carolina market. I'm in the South Carolina market, and I'm in Indiana and Wisconsin. Those are the main areas that we work, right? So they all have different regulations, right? In South Carolina, this has always been in place, right? And their MLS has already started offering this, right? Or how'd you put it when you came on, Jay?
That compensation.
You said pulled it.
Oh yeah, they pulled no longer published.
They no longer published. There you go. So that's how South Carolina's worked, right? Now my agent had a great relationship. So I get the referral from the listing agent. And we'll get into at the end how the lender realtor communication and relationship really needs to change, which I think is an opportunity for both of us. But I get the referral on a Thursday, right? The agent, this is a past client of the agent. I do my work on Friday. My work was done on Friday. We sent out the pre-approval before we left on Friday. I get numbers for a property that the client is interested in on Saturday, right? I called my partner and said, hey, are you guys making an offer? I just sent them numbers. He stated, no, I'm away at a tournament coaching my son. I'll get back with them on Monday, right? The savvy agent at the open house says, in order to put in an offer on this listing, I need your buyer agency agreement. And if you don't have one, the only way to get this place would be to sign up with me, right? They wanted the place. They couldn't get a hold of the agent. He was coaching. They signed the buyer agency agreement with that agent at the open house. And oh, by the way, that agent came in on Sunday before he was back and got the listing, $1.2 million in commission gone. He didn't have the buyer agency agreement signed because it was a past client that he thought he already had the relationship with. $1.2 million gone. The other agent got him. She got 3% on both sides. So take 6% times 1.2 million, and you'll see what the commission is because they didn't have the conversation up front. How do we avoid that, Jay?
Well, first and foremost, I don't know all the details behind it, but if you knew the client was out going to look at homes and you had that buyer consultation, at the buyer consultation, you would have got a buyer agency agreement signed, and then you'd give them instructions on what to do when they go to an open house. So they would already have the instructions, and you tell them, here's how to do this. That's one thing. If you would have started with the listing, so one change that we've done that I recommend everybody do is when you go to do a listing, you do a buyer consultation at the same time. So your appointments, in my opinion,
Love that. Say that again.
when you go do your listing, you do a buyer consultation at the same time. So your appointments are going to get longer, but that's okay, because what you need to basically do, and this should be just standard practice by this point, like, hey, Chad, you're selling your home. One of the things I always do is I'm looking for motivation. Why are you selling your home? Okay, why are you selling your home? I ask them why they're selling their home like 4 times, right? Because I want to get the real reason why they're selling their home. Then the next thing you always say is, okay, once I sell your home, where are you going? And that's when you'll discover, hey, are they a buyer too? You should be doing both appointments at the same time.
Love that.
Because so now if they come in to be a buyer, one of the very first questions in the buyer consultation interview that I have is, hey, do you have a home to sell? Or are you renting? Or are you living in Chad's basement? I mean, you're not living in Phil's basement, it's flooded, but Chad's basement's dry. So you look at it and you basically say, where are you living right now? And they say, oh, we got this place here. What are you going to do with that place? Well, we're going to sell it. Boom. Now you bring out the listing appointment. You
Right.
should be doing both appointments at the same time, always.
So always be prepared to have,
Yeah,
give your
might as well.
listing presentation and buyer intake
Yep.
process.
And
Love it.
and this is creating, I mean, like I'm super excited for these changes. I mean, I'm like way over the top geeking out on these changes. I'm super excited about it.
This is Jay excited, by the way.
Yeah. And the thing of it is, the reason I'm excited about it is because it allows those that know what they're doing. It allows those that are good at negotiating, good at explaining their value, to demonstrate now why you should hire me over someone else. I'm the days of Holly listing a property, and she let's say Holly lists a property and she doesn't hold the line very hard on the buyer compensation. So what happens is, well, better yet, let me back up. Holly's listing a property, and let's say it's a property she really wants to get, and she's been kicked around a little bit later in the month, so she's kind of a little bit down, and she needs a win really, really bad. So instead of taking 7%, she decides to take this one for 4.5 because she really needs a win, right? Now what Holly gets to do is Holly gets to go, you know what? I took it at 4.5, I got a win, but I'm not going to take a pay cut. So I'm going to put it on MLS at 1.5. So then now I come and show it, and I have a buyer's rep agreement with my client at 3, and MLS payout says 1.5. It was a lot tougher to go back to my client and say, man, they're only paying 1.5. How do you want to handle the other 1.5? No, a lot of times I would say, you know what? I don't want to get greedy. I'm just going to take what they're paying. You got a deal. But now I get to go in and say, look, I'm worth 3. I don't care what Holly's paying. Even if Holly's not paying anything, I'm worth 3. So the buyer agents should be super excited because now you get to determine your own value.
So we're in your buyer intake process. Where at the, I want to ask you two things. And I have a checklist that we've created to be good partners with our agent partners when we get a buyer to substantiate. It has 97 things that the buyer agent does. And I'm going with my agent partners and saying, hey, if there's anything that you don't do on here, let's talk about it so I can take it off yours. And we're going through the process to customize these to each of our agent. But we figured out 97 things that a buyer agent does for the client throughout the process. So when we hear, hey, we're not sure we're going to use an agent, or hey, we're not sold on Jay yet, we might just work directly with the listing agent. We've already heard that in some of our home buying consultations, by the way. We can put this list in front of them. It's overwhelming too how much y'all do for a buyer. When we put this in front of them, okay, so you're going to do all of this, right? What you do understand that that listing agent is doing none of these for you. So you should probably take a long, strong look at all 97 of these things and see, A, if you even have the experience or know how to do them, right? So that's what we're doing to provide value to our partners. What are some of the things? I know you have a checklist. I stole a lot of these things from you, Jay, of what you do. What are some of those things that you highlight during that buyer intake process? And then talk about at what point you're having the conversation of, this is what I'm charging you. Here's the buyer agency agreement. This is my commission. Just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I typically talk about what I'm charging. It's really it's really kind of towards the tail end of it, because I believe it's hard to ask for compensation until you can demonstrate the value. So that, what the list you're talking about, that's up front in the conversation. It says here's the expectations I have of you, Chad, as a buyer. And basically I go through your expectations that I have of you. Like, you're only going to work with me. When you walk into a listing, you're going to tell them you're represented. If you hear about stuff, like that's the expectations. And then I go, here's what you can expect from me. And I start going through all those things that I do. Like, hey, I'm gonna make sure that they didn't overlist that property. You know, we go over market stats too. So I'll say, Chad, you remember when we were talking, the list to sell ratio in our area is almost 99.6%, right? So that means if we find a property that's properly listed, that means I'm gonna ask you to make a full price offer. But one value I'm gonna give you is I'm gonna do a market analysis on that property before you make an offer. I don't want to assume that the listing price is market value. But if it is market value, you're going to have to make a full price offer or more to get it in this market. But if it's not market value, then we're going to offer market value, and that'll be based on a market analysis that I'll do before you make an offer on a property. And then you start to go back and you start to tell stories. Always remember, stories sell. Okay. So you tell stories, and if the story has fear in it, they sell even more. So you tell stories like, hey, I know some people that worked directly with the listing agent before. Listing agent recommended that they didn't need to do an inspection. And they bought the home. And you know what they found out? They had to stick over $300,000 in the home making repairs the first month. And after they did that, they did not like the home anymore. So they asked us to sell it. You go and sell a $700,000 home that's only worth $350,000. Because just because you put $300,000 into the home does not make it worth $300,000 more. And this is a true story. It happened on a lake property where longtime client of ours, their daughter started dating a real estate agent. This is the only property he's never bought with us. The only one. And he's bought like, I don't know, 8 or 9 with us. And he calls us up to fix his problem. And he's looking, he's like, I want to sue the agent. And I'm like going, what happened here? He goes, well, we bought this property. Our agent told us not to do a home inspection. I'm like, why would you do that?
And now he's not dating our daughter anymore.
Exactly. So I mean, you find these stories, and there's enough of them out there, and you tell them like, not only my job is to get you in the house, but my job to make sure that house is going to be safe for you and your family. Both Brian, and a lot of you guys know Brian that works on my team. Both Brian and I both have turned down sales because we thought the house would make their kids sick. Like there's mold in the basement, and they're like, we still want to buy it, Jay. Or I mean, the last one was Brian. They're like, we still want to buy it, Brian. And Brian basically told him, I will not write a purchase agreement on this house because you're going to put kids in the basement and it's full of mold.
Yeah.
Like I won't do it. And when you have that conviction that you won't compromise your client's safety or their health for a commission check, that's when you get long-term loyalty. So you tell these stories so it builds your value. And you start to relate. And so you start going through those. So we talk about those. We talk about all the things we do. We tell them that the other agent's there to represent the seller. They do and say things in the seller's best interest. And you say, and then what you can basically say is, look, I'm trained to do it too. I can take the same property. If I'm working for a seller, I do different things than I'm working for the buyer, same property. So you kind of go through that. Then the next part about that is building your value. And because every agent's going to say they do those 97 things, right? So the next part is building your value. So this is stuff you do above and beyond the 97 things. So here's some things that we have. We have a moving trailer that they can use. And we're not talking like this is over the top, but the trailer is $5-6 grand. It's enclosed to buy one, right? We got our logos on it. It's nice. I mean, a lot of people, even if they hire a moving company, a lot of people still got boxes and stuff they have to move. So we'll let them use the moving trailer for free. So there's one value out of them. We also make sure we're going to feed their movers day of closing. Another little value add them. We have a home clean. We send our cleaners in there to clean the home right before they get in there. Another value out from. We do 5 hours of handyman service Guess what they use the handyman service mostly for? Hanging TVs. That's what they mainly use it for.
Love that.
So you give them 5 hours of handyman service. Find a local handyman and give them 25 bucks an hour or 50 bucks an hour. It costs you 500, but now you can charge 3%, right? We have a love it or list it program. It works like this. You're gonna love the home. If you don't, we'll list it for free in the first 30 days. So we'll put it on the market, we'll list it for free. We basically, free means they're not paying us. They're not paying the list side. They still would have to pay a buy side if that buyer agent came. But guess what they have to do too? They have to buy another home.
Right.
So we'll get paid on that one there. So if you think about it, what we're doing is we're doing that service and we'll still get compensated, and no one's ever taken us up on that. But you create these things.
I love what you said there. So let's dig into a few of those things. So everything I'm working on right now, and Jay said it there, is promise, proof. Proof is the storytelling, right? Proof is, hey, this is this property. I can't tell you the seller's name, but this is proof that they bought it for $750 and it sold for $400, right? They went directly to the listing agent. Here's the house, right? That's the proof. Everything should be promise, proof, call to action, right? That's when you tell these stories is when you substantiate your value, right? So going over the checklist, going over the value adds, then you're on to putting the buyer agency agreement in front of them, Jay.
Yeah. I slide it in front of them, and same thing I do on a listing.
I want you to go over too, because I love that you do this. You taught me this. When you come into their house, right, or they come into your office, just set the stage for that. And I love that you say, hey, at the end of this, I'm going to ask you to sign something. So just talk through that a little bit, because I've started to use that during every loan selection meeting, and it just sets the stage that I'm going to ask you to commit to something, and I'm going to ask you to sign something today.
Yeah, so I mean, at some point in the presentation, again, we go through the expectations, and one of the things I will tell them is the expectation is that they're going to be signing an agreement at the last thing we do. I mean, it's an expectation we set. I think most people, one thing if you get really, really good at is telling people what's next. And so you should apply that to both your buy side, your sell side, always telling them what's next. Like, hey, we just got an offer. Here's what next. You have to meet with me, or we have to set up a Zoom to go over it. Hey, you're coming in here. We're going to do a buyer consultation. I'm going to explain to you the value that we add. I'm going to explain the services we do. I'm going to explain the expectations of you, and I'm going to tell you the expectations of me. And when we're done, I'm going to ask you to sign a buyer's agency agreement. I'm going to ask you to commit to me. I'm going to ask you to hold up your end of the deal. I mean, so we're always telling people what's next.
And then that's what I love, because we do the same thing. It's an interview. They're talking most of the time. I'm just setting expectations, guiding the conversation with great questions, but they feel very in control because they're talking way more than I am. I'm taking notes and listening, but I'm guiding the conversation where I want it to go through great questions. And
Yeah,
I hear that you do the same.
Well, and one of the things is, saying things like, well, tell me more about that. Having those questions that makes them come back. So a lot of times I'll tell people on the list side, one of my favorite questions is, what's more important to you, money or timing? And they're always like, well, both. Okay. Yeah, I get that both are really important, but if you had to pick one or the other, are you okay with more money or are you okay with more time? Well, I say, well, I want more money. Okay, so if it takes me 3 years to sell your house, you're good as long as you get more money. Well, no, Jay, we got to be out by October. We want to be gone before the snow falls. Okay, so let me
Everyone
rephrase
should
this
write
thing.
that down. That is money. That is getting to the point when you have to have updates and you got to have the tough conversation. Remember, you said timing was most important. I love that, dude. That's awesome.
Well, so I would come back and I say, Chad, you told me you wanted to be gone before snow falls. I got up this morning, it was 64 degrees out. It's coming. You know what they say, you know what they say on HBO, winter is coming. Like, so I mean, so if you can ask the questions to find out motivation, then the motivation should come back in every conversation. Price reductions, making offers. I mean, a lot of times I'll tell people one of my favorite things on buyers is this one is like, you do know, Chad, I've told you this before, but if you go home and think about this, somebody saw it yesterday and thought about it last night and they're making an offer today. So tomorrow, when you wake up and you've made a decision to make an offer on it, I do not want to hear any complaints when I tell you it's sold. Well, do you know there's another offer, Jay? I don't know there's another offer. I just know people need to think about things overnight, and there were showings yesterday. So, I mean, it's like, or another favorite one, I always tell people, let's just come in with our best offer right out of the gate. Just to encourage the seller not to look for another offers, not to call back the past showings. Let's just give our best offer out of the gate. And they always say, well, do you think there'll be multiple offers? I'm like, I'll tell you what, the only time we're going to know if there's multiple offers is when they call us back and say they didn't work with ours.
Right. So at what point in this process do you transition from the checklist and the value adds to sliding the buyer agency agreement? What are you charging on a commission? Are you determining it by how much work you think is involved with this buyer and any other best practices you want to share as you're putting this document in front of them?
Yeah, so we're doing 3%. We're still doing just a fixed percentage. We are having the conversation with them of how that's going to be paid. And so we're very clear to them on how it can be paid. You know, we can, in our state, we can write it actually in the contract. Wisconsin changed it. They added commission lines right in there. Minnesota has it as well. So we can write it right in the contract. The days of leaving an open-endedness saying, you know, look, I'll take up to anything the seller gives me. You can't do that anymore. That's probably the biggest change that we're going to see. That's probably the biggest change that we're going to see, is if you agreed to take 2% and the sellers agreed to pay you 3%, well, you shot yourself in the foot. And that's the funny thing is that's right there. That right there is the reason why I'm excited about this. Because if you only think you're worth 2%, and I talked to my seller and I got my seller agree to pay you 3%, I did a better negotiating for your pay than you did, but you're not going to get my rate because you shot yourself in the foot ahead of time. But that's what I think I like about it the most is you have to set what you're worth and go from there. And there's going to be a lot of buyer agents out there that will do it for less, and there'll be a lot that will do it for a flat fee, or they'll do some type of agreement with ranging for showings. I mean, it's going to be really interesting. The way we're doing 3% in the buyer agreement. We're doing 3%.
And that's right at the end, you're asking them to sign that document after you've substantiated your value, went over your checklist of everything that you do, give your, hey, these are our above and beyonds that you will have access to, that it's buyer agency agreement. Here's our 3%.
Yep. And then I'm saying, hey, look, we're going to do all that, and we're only asking for 3%.
What script do you use to say, hey, you might have heard about this in the media, or this is what changed? Are you bringing up the changes, or are you just saying we charge 3%? This might come from the seller, it might come from the buyer.
Yeah, I'm not bringing up, you might have heard this in the media, because what I'm realizing is those that heard it bring it up. Those that didn't hear it don't bring it up.
Right.
I'm not bringing it up. To me, it's no different than what we've done for the last 29 years. The only difference now is the only difference now is that we can put in the contract for us, because and this is part of the reason why we're in this mess, is too many agents used to say, hey, if the buyer doesn't pay the commission, the seller does. So buy with me, it's free. It was never free. I mean, if you showed them a for sale by owner or some builders, they weren't paying anyways. So you would have had to have a difficult conversation or do the work for nothing back then. So it's really no different.
Right. That's like when we had yield spread premium on the back end that we didn't have to disclose as a loan officer, right? And we just said, oh, the investor pays us on the back end. You don't know what's anything. Like, no, it's built in your rate and I'm upcharging you, right? So I see a lot of parallels between what we went through with Dodd-Frank 2009, 2010, and this change. And what I will tell you is that first 6 to 8 months was a lot of what I'm hearing now. It was a little scary. There was a lot of people saying, oh, it doesn't change everything. Yeah, it changed everything. Right. And those
Yeah.
that could negotiate and substantiate their value did. And and the cream rise to the top. And there was a lot more for the strong lenders because all of
So
the pretenders got weeded out. And
what
yes,
one
it
thing I
was
would
shaky for
share,
6 months.
one thing I would share with people is a lot of us have these BAC fees. And then I'm going to jump to that question that popped up, but a lot of us have these BAC fees. And and here's something I learned a long time ago. You can comp dessert, but you cannot comp the meal. So if you're a restaurant, you cannot comp the meal. You can always comp dessert. The reason you can't comp the meal is because the meal is what pays to keep the lights on, the parking lot paved, the doors open, the staff paid. You can't comp the meal, but you can comp dessert. So here's what most of us don't have. Most of us don't have a dessert menu. So you need to create a dessert menu so you can comp it when you feel like you're in trouble. And to me, that dessert menu is your BAC fee, your broker administrative compliance, or whatever you guys want to call them. I've seen them as high as, I mean, one of my good friends, I think, is like 850 now. So I think everybody, if you don't have a BAC fee, create one. So you have the opportunity to comp that when they're getting some pushback. The other thing we're going to see is you're going to see ones where my contract says 3%. And I get a hold of the seller and the seller's willing to pay 2. And now the next question is going to come up and go, what do we do about that additional point, Jay? And this is where you're going to have to decide, are you going to hold the line or not? And this is where you're going to have to work with the lender and say, hey, maybe we can talk to the lender and see about if we can have that point put somewhere there, or if we can wrap into closing costs. But that you're going to have these conversations. But I tell you what, I bet it's a hell of a lot easier to go from that they agreed to pay you 3 and to go down to 2 than it will be if you agreed to 2 and they're offering 3. Because if you agreed to 2 and they're offering 3, you're getting 2. But if
That's
they agree
right.
to 3 and they're offering 2, you might get 2, you might get 3.
I
So
want to make sure we have time for questions, and I love that
yeah,
you
the
hit
highest
on.
and best one.
I love that you hit on go back to the lender, right? So here's some changes, and we, by the way, Jay and I haven't went over this, so you shoot holes in it if you see problems with it, Jay. This is new to us too. So here's what I think is really important between our relationship as lender and realtor and our communication. Number one, get the buyer agency agreement up front, have the buyer intake process before you send them to us. I think that's super duper important, and definitely before you show them property. Number two, send that to us. We need to see that, right? We need to see what you're getting paid. My job as a lender is to make you look good, save you time, and make you more money. I'll say it again. My job is to make you look good, save you time, make you more money. That's my job as a partner to you, right? Yes, Holly.
So along that same line, Chad, like, would it be helpful to lenders if when we sign a buyer's agency with the buyer to send our buyer's agency to you? So you
Yeah,
see
yep.
what we're asking? Okay.
Yeah, so my team is now trained to ask for it. We're going to ask for it 3 times up front. We're going to ask for it when the lead comes in. We're going to ask for it at pre-approval. We're going to ask for it on, I call them TBD calls. I call my, if my team hasn't performed, my first call to the client to check in to see how their search is going, I'm asking for it and say, hey, we need to stop showing them property so I can go back to you, my agent, and say, hey, we need to stop right now, and I need to know this up front, right? Here's why, right? Here's why. I need to communicate to you offline with the buyer. Yes, they have the down payment. Yes, they have their closing costs, right? Yes, they can pay you. So then you know how to negotiate. You know what properties take them to. You know what to ask for. You need all those variables, in my opinion, to take the buyer out and to look out for your paycheck, right? Here's the problem with most lenders, guys. They are order takers. They don't think of, okay, this client says that I want to put 20% down, right? And I pre-approve them at 20% down. And now we're into a property where the seller won't pay. And they won't challenge of, hey, you can put 5% down and nothing really changes. And PMI is super cheap. And you can pay Jay his 3% and nothing changes barely at all. Right? Your monthly payments are $70 difference. You want this place, you need Jay's reputation, right? And it costs you $80, $90 a month. It's not that big a change. The problem is most lenders don't know how to push back, don't even do the prep work to lay out those options. And they're not thinking of it from your paycheck standpoint. They're thinking about it from their own. And there's going to be very few. That's why I'm so excited for this change, because it is opportunity galore for me to stand out in the pre-approval process, right? So we are doing two things. We are doing two forms of pre-approval. One goes to the buyer, one goes to the agent. So on that cover sheet, it says, yes, they can pay you. Yes, they can pay their closing costs. Yes, they can pay their down payment. Or no, we need some credit somewhere here. Make sure you talk to me about before the offer goes in so we can structure this so everybody wins.
Yeah, so the big question I'm gonna have so I'm working with Chad, and one of the questions I have with Chad is basically gonna be this. Hey, push comes to shove, can they pay my fee out of pocket?
Right.
And I need to know yes or no. Because if they can't, we're going into this completely differently than if they can. So you go back to the highest and best. What's my strategy when it comes highest and best? My strategy, first and foremost, is to get the house for the client. Now, I'm going to tell the client, look, whether or not their seller is paying a fee or not is going to be the first part of it. So I'm going to tell the client, look, seller's willing to pay X for commission, or seller's not willing to pay it. You know, I'm going to know that going ahead of time after having that conversation with the agent. Now, in our state, again, we can write it in the purchase agreement. So when you look at it from that perspective, if a highest and best situation, and I'm advising my client and I'm saying, look, the seller's willing to pay this, but to get the house, you may not want to take the seller's offer of paying the commission. So if I'm looking at it going, let's say it's whatever the house price is, let's say the seller's willing to pay 2%. And I'm talking to Chad. Chad says, hey, buyer can pay that out of pocket. Then I would go to the buyer and I'd say, hey, I think we make the offer and we don't require the seller to pay the commission. You pay me the commission out of pocket. Let's not put it in your offer. Because that way your offer, even without raising our price, your offer has a higher net to the seller than maybe some of the other ones. Because what's going to happen is those other agents, they're going to be writing their commission in the offer because they don't trust their client to pay out of pocket, or they didn't ask the question if the client could pay out of pocket, or they didn't reach out to the lender and find out they could pay out of pocket.
The communication, right?
So, and I'd be going back to my client saying, hey, I know Chad said put 25% down, but he also gave you the option of putting 10% down. So you can take that other 15%, that's 45 grand on $300,000 house. You can take that other 15%, pay me three out of it, take the other 12, you can use it for furniture repairs. I don't care what you use it for, but this way we can make a stronger offer because we don't have to put the commission in the offer.
And here's what
highest and best, you're going to have a lot of that.
Here's what everything is, guys, for the buyers. It's programming with the lender involved. If I know we're going to likely they're going to pay this out of pocket, then when I'm sending them numbers on the property, it's just in their cash to close. We go monthly payments, cash to close. We don't send them a full breakdown, this cost, title work, this. We do that if they ask for it. The problem is every lender sends that out and it overwhelms the client with details. We keep everything monthly payment, cash close, monthly payment, cash close. If they ask for details, just like Jay said about the media, he's not going to bring it up because if they don't bring it up, they don't know about it or don't care, right? The same goes with numbers. Most people think they care about rate and all this. They don't when they boil down. They care about monthly payment, cash to close. So if I can put your commission in that cash to close and they see a few properties with that, they just get used to it, right? It's easier to peel it back and say, oh yeah, that was in case the commission got included in the cash close. I'm telling you, 70 to 80% of people don't ask any questions. They just want to know those two numbers. So I think this is super duper important.
And
Jay,
the other side of things I'm really gonna see is you're going to have to put more time up front.
Yes.
And I do a lot of new construction. And here's what I love about new construction. I tell people all the time, people will be like, man, you're spending a lot of time with us up front. And I said, yes. And here's why. Because I spend a lot of time up front because I don't want to get down the road and find out you can't build the house because it's not good for anybody. So I want to find out up front if you can build the house. I think in the business and real estate now, you're going to be putting more time up front to make, then you're probably you'll do more time up front and you'll work with less people, but you'll close a higher percentage. Then the way I'm even thinking I'm gonna have a lender call during my buyer consultation. If they haven't already met with the lender before the consultation, that might be something that I'll text Chad and I'll say, hey, I got a buyer consult at noon. I'd like to kind of loop you in at 12:30 and we kind of go through qualification questions.
Yeah, I mean, for you guys, truly the opportunity that I see is the cream rising to the top, the ability to negotiate, substantiate your value, but also getting rid of the people that aren't that serious about buying a home. People are less likely to go out touring, in my opinion, with you guys. They're not going to come in and sign all this and say, I owe you X, Y, and Z if they're not serious. So I think you get a more serious buyer that has put pen to paper and knows they're contractually obligated. Sure, you're going to get those people that come through that still, go to look at homes and just play the system, but I think it will be a lot less. And I think that's a great opportunity for you. So this is just the tip of the iceberg on this. Jay Fletch is a master negotiator. He is the best that I've seen. His results, what was it? You 50 million under contract right now, closing this year still? Pretty close.
Yeah, I think it's like 45, but we
Yeah.
closed a couple.
Or so to have that, it doesn't happen overnight. It happens through coaching. It happens through being a master negotiator. No, he doesn't have a bunch of agents doing deals and rolling that under his production. Those are his leads, right? His team are salaried employees that work under Jay's leads, under his relationships. This is all his business. So this doesn't happen magically. You don't get systems and scripts like this without training. So Jay and I are part owners in B Coaching and Consulting. Holly's one of our coaches who's on. This happens from being trained by the best, by having someone like Jay tear apart your process, saying that you need to change X, Y, and Z. Here's the script that I would use. Hey, here's my checklist. That is how this happens. So because of this change, we're doing a great event. There's really two changes we see going on in the industry. There's the NAR settlement we're talking about right now, and there's the takeover of AI, ClickFunnels, technology. And I believe if you don't have a brand and if you're not high tech meets high touch, that means running a relationship-based business with the technology you need to be high touch. I believe you'll be away in 5 years. I don't think you'll exist. You need to be able to brand, high tech, high touch, relationship based business mixed with technology with a strong brand. Those agents, those lenders are going to go to the top. The rest, I believe, will be replaced. So I see this in my 25 years of mortgage lending as the biggest opportunity I have seen in this industry since 2008. So we would love to have you. Number one, if you're on Facebook Live, DM me and just say checklist. Okay. If you are on Zoom, please email me just your email or put your email in the comments, and we will send you 3 things. We're going to send you Jay's checklist and his buyer intake process. We're going to send you my checklist, and we want to invite you to our event where we will help you bring this all together. It's called Elevate. It's in Nashville. Hang out with Jay, hang out with me, hang out with Holly, hang out with our principals. It's an amazing resort. I'm bringing my family, best water park I've ever seen. Come hang out with the best in the country for a couple of days. You will be able to get these systems, get these scripts, train for 2 days, and go back and improve your business. Every big decision, all the best things in my life, I decided to get married at an event. I decided to have a family at an event. I decided to grow a team at an event. I decided to start a branch at an event. Every big decision I've made in my life was made at an event. I couldn't even tell you the amount of money, the improvement in my life from going to events, being around people like Jay and Holly, and not only just improving my business, improving my life. So we would love to have you there. We will send you details to each, and I'll follow up with everybody that would like to talk about it. Any final thoughts, Jay?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I don't think you recognized how many major things in your life happened at an event until I told you one day that big decisions happen at big events. And
Yeah, I
then
started going through it after you
you
said
start going
that.
back and you're like, holy cow.
Yeah,
But that's the story in my life too. All the major changes in my life and the trajectory of things that are so good in my life happened at a big event, and that's where major decisions are made. And that's why I pity all the companies out there no longer investing in live events, and because you don't get the same effect on a Zoom, and you don't get the same energy, you don't get the same, where am I going to be if I don't make this decision?
yeah,
And I mean, at the end of the day, do nothing, nothing changes.
that's right. Well, buddy, I got my Metallica shirt on because I'm about ready to get on a plane and come to Metallica and see you up in Minneapolis. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you for doing this. Gosh, come hang out with Jay. You can see how spectacular it is. Come hang out with me. Come hang out with Holly. And if you don't like us, Post Malone's playing on Saturday, and the Gaylord is the best resort I've ever seen. So we would love to have you there. Thank you for being on. I got all your emails. We'll send this. If you want a 15-minute one-on-one with one of us, I will make that happen for you. We'll help you through your process. All we ask is you spread the word about our coaching company.
Hey, Chad, what time is your plane land?
I get in at 5 o'clock Central.
Okay, so you got enough time to make it to my cornhole event.
All right. All right. All your past clients will be there?
About 150 of them, not all of
right.
them. I can't fit that many of them in that facility.
Well,
Wow,
there's a
that's
reason you
awesome.
have that many. Well, man, just thank you so much. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for being a breath of fresh air to our industry. And just thank you for all the education that you provide.
Thanks, guys. Awesome.
Thanks,
And
guys.
Jay, you are the GOAT in real estate. So
Hey.
thank you.
I appreciate it.
All
Love
right.
you, buddy.
See y'all.
See ya.